Ever planted a grapevine only to end up with a tangled mess of leaves and barely any fruit? You are not alone, and I am going to fix that for you today. In this video, I am walking you through the complete process of growing grapes from start to finish. We are covering everything from selecting the right variety for your climate to pruning techniques that will have your vines loaded with clusters. Plus, stick around to the end, where I am going to show you how to turn your homegrown grapes into fresh grape juice right in your own kitchen. It is easier than you think and absolutely delicious. So let us get into it. Grapes are one of the most rewarding plants you can grow in your backyard. They are beautiful, they are productive, and once established, a single vine can produce fruit for 30 years or more. The good news is that growing grapes is actually much simpler than most people think. Once you understand how the vine grows and what it needs from you each season, you will be harvesting basketfuls of grapes in no time. So let us start by understanding how a grapevine actually works. One of the most important things to know when you are growing grapes is understanding what part of the vine actually produces fruit. And here is what trips up a lot of gardeners. Grapes only produce fruit on new growth that emerges from one-year-old wood. Let me say that again, because it is the key to everything. The clusters of grapes you harvest this summer are growing on green shoots that sprouted this spring from canes that grew last year. This is why pruning is so critical with grapes, and we will get deep into that in a bit. If you let a grapevine just grow wild without pruning, it puts all its energy into producing more and more leaves and vines, and you end up with a jungle that produces almost no fruit. But when you prune correctly, you are directing all that energy into a manageable number of shoots, and each one of those shoots can produce 2 or 3 beautiful clusters of grapes. The vine itself has a few parts you should know. The main trunk is the permanent woody stem that supports everything. From the trunk you have arms or cordons that extend horizontally along your trellis. And from those arms you have the fruiting canes and spurs where your grapes actually develop. Once you understand this basic structure, everything else about grape growing starts to make sense. Now that we know how grapes grow, let us talk about selecting the right variety for your garden. And this is where a lot of people make their first mistake. They see a beautiful grape at the nursery, grab it, plant it, and then wonder why it struggles or never produces well. The truth is, grape varieties are very specific about climate, and choosing the right one for your region makes all the difference. If you are in USDA zones 5 through 7, American grape varieties and American hybrids are going to be your best bet. These include varieties like Concord, which is that classic grape jelly flavor, Catawba, Niagara, and Reliance. These are cold-hardy, disease-resistant, and they do not need a particularly long growing season. Concord grapes, for example, can handle winter temperatures down to -15 degrees Fahrenheit once established. If you are in zones 7 through 10, with mild winters and hot summers, European varieties open up to you. These are your table grapes and wine grapes like Thompson Seedless, Flame Seedless, Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon. They need a long, warm growing season, and they are more susceptible to certain diseases. But the fruit quality is exceptional. For those of you in the humid southeast, Muscadine grapes are the way to go. These are native to the region, incredibly disease-resistant, and they thrive in the heat and humidity that would devastate other grape types. Varieties like Carlos, Noble, and Supreme are excellent choices. Here is a pro tip I have learned over the years. Visit a local vineyard or talk to your county extension office before you buy. They can tell you exactly which varieties perform best in your specific area. I made the mistake early on of planting a European variety in a climate that was just a bit too humid, and I fought fungal diseases every single season. When I switched to a variety better suited to my conditions, the difference was night and day. Once you have selected your variety, we need to prepare the planting site. And getting this right from the beginning saves you years of frustration. Grapes have 3 non-negotiable requirements. They need full sun, they need good drainage, and they need air circulation. Full sun means at least 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. Grapes are sun worshippers. The more sun they get, the sweeter the fruit and the fewer disease problems you will have. If you plant them in partial shade, you will get lots of leafy growth but disappointing harvests. Good drainage is absolutely critical. Grape roots will rot in soggy soil faster than almost any other fruit crop. If you have heavy clay soil that holds water, you have 2 options. Either amend it heavily with compost and coarse sand to improve drainage, or plant your vine on a raised mound about 12 to 18 inches high. I have seen grapes thrive on hillsides where water naturally drains away, and I have seen them struggle in flat areas where water pools after rain. The difference in performance is dramatic. Air circulation helps prevent fungal diseases, which are the #1 challenge for grape growers in humid climates. Avoid planting in low spots where cold air and moisture settle. A gentle slope or an open area where breezes can flow through the vine is ideal. Before you plant, get a soil test done. Grapes prefer a soil pH between 6.0 and 6.8. If your soil is too acidic, add lime. If it is too alkaline, add sulfur. You want to adjust the pH before planting because it is much harder to correct once the vine is established. I like to prepare my planting site in the fall before a spring planting. I dig out an area about 3 feet wide and 2 feet deep, mix in several inches of good compost, and let it settle over winter. By spring, you have got a perfect planting bed ready to go. Now let us get that vine in the ground. Spring planting is ideal for most areas right after the last frost when the soil has warmed up and dried out a bit. You can plant in fall in zones 8 and warmer, but spring gives the vine a full growing season to establish roots before winter. When you bring home a bare root grapevine from the nursery, which is how most are sold, you will notice it has a small root system and 1 or 2 canes. Before planting, soak the roots in water for 2 to 4 hours. This rehydrates them and gets the vine ready to grow. Dig your hole about 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. If you amended the soil ahead of time, like I mentioned, this is easy work. Create a small mound of soil at the bottom of the hole and spread the roots out over that mound. This encourages the roots to grow outward rather than circling around. Position the vine so the graft union, that little bump where the fruiting variety was grafted onto the rootstock, sits about 2 inches above the soil line. If you bury the graft union, the fruiting variety can send out its own roots, which defeats the purpose of the rootstock. Fill in around the roots with soil, firming it gently as you go to eliminate air pockets. Do not stomp it down hard, just a nice firm press. Water it in well, giving it a good deep soak to settle the soil around the roots. Here is what I do after planting. I cut that vine back to just 2 or 3 buds. I know it feels wrong to chop off most of what you just planted, but trust me on this. You want the vine to put all its energy into establishing a strong root system that first year, not into producing a bunch of weak growth up top. Those 2 or 3 buds will push out shoots, and you will select the strongest one to become your main trunk. By the way, if you are finding this helpful, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss future videos where I go even deeper on grape growing. All right, let us keep going. Now we need to talk about training and supporting your vine during that critical first year. Grapes absolutely need a support structure. You cannot just let them sprawl on the ground and expect good results. The support keeps the fruit off the soil, improves air circulation, makes pruning and harvesting easier, and allows sunlight to reach all parts of the vine. The most common support system for home gardeners is a simple 2-wire trellis. Here is how to build one. Set 2 sturdy posts about 15 to 20 feet apart. These posts should be at least 8 feet long with 3 feet buried in the ground and 5 feet above. Use 4x4 treated lumber or metal T-posts, something that is going to last for decades because your grapevine certainly will. String your first wire at about 3 feet off the ground. This is your cordon wire where the main horizontal arms of your vine will grow. String your second wire at about 5 feet off the ground. This supports the upward growing shoots during the season. Make sure these wires are tight. Loose wires sag under the weight of a mature vine and make everything harder. During year 1, your job is simple. You are growing a single, strong trunk. After those buds push out shoots, select the most vigorous one and let it grow. Remove any other shoots that emerge. As this main shoot grows, tie it loosely to a stake or to your trellis post to keep it growing straight up. Do not let it flop over or start climbing sideways yet. You want vertical growth. If it reaches the top of your first wire that first summer, that is excellent. Pinch off the tip to encourage it to branch. If it does not make it that high, no problem. It will continue growing next spring. I see a lot of new grape. Growers get impatient during year 1. They want to let the vine grow wild and maybe even get a few grapes. Resist that temptation. This first year is about building the foundation. A vine that develops a strong root system and a solid trunk in year 1 will outproduce a neglected vine for decades to come. Think of it like building a house. You do not skip the foundation because you are excited to pick out curtains. Now we arrive at what I consider the most important skill in grape growing, and that is pruning. Get this right, and you will have more grapes than you know what to do with. Get it wrong, and you will be frustrated year after year. But do not worry. I am going to break it down, so it makes complete sense. Remember what I said earlier about grapes fruiting on new growth from 1-year-old wood? That is the entire basis of pruning. Every winter, you are selecting which canes from this year's growth will produce fruit next year, and you are removing everything else. For home gardeners, I recommend a pruning system called spur pruning because it is the simplest to understand and maintain. Here is how it works. Once your vine is mature, which takes about 3 years, you will have a permanent trunk and 2 permanent arms called cordons extending along that first wire, one going left and one going right. Along each cordon, you will have short stubby branches called spurs, spaced about 6 to 8 inches apart. Each spur has 2 or 3 buds on it. In spring, each of those buds pushes out a new shoot, and each shoot can produce 2 or 3 clusters of grapes. After harvest, when the vine goes dormant in late winter, you prune each of those shoots back to a new 2 or 3 bud spur. And the cycle repeats. The key is to prune in late winter when the vine is fully dormant, but before buds start to swell. In most areas, that is February or March. Here is my step-by-step approach. First, step back and look at the overall structure. Identify your trunk and your 2 main cordons. Everything else is either last year's fruiting wood or new canes that grew this past season. Second, look for the canes that grew this past year. They are smooth, tan-colored, and about pencil thickness, roughly 1/4 inch in diameter. These are what will produce fruit next year. Third, select the canes you want to keep as new spurs. Choose ones that are healthy, well-positioned along the cordon, and about 6 to 8 inches apart. Fourth, cut each selected cane back to 2 or 3 buds. Count the buds from the base of the cane, then make your cut about 1/2 inch above the last bud you are keeping. Fifth, remove everything else. All the spindly growth, all the extra canes, anything growing where you do not want it. Be ruthless. A common mistake is leaving too much wood on the vine. When you are done pruning, your vine should look almost bare. It should look like you took too much off. But I promise you, when spring comes and every one of those buds pushes out a vigorous shoot loaded with grape clusters, you will understand why we prune so heavily. I prune off about 90% of the previous year's growth every single winter. and my vines reward me with huge harvests because of it. Now that we have covered the structural stuff, let us talk about the ongoing care that keeps your grapevine healthy and productive season after season. The good news is that established grapes are not particularly demanding plants, but they do need attention at key times throughout the year. Watering is one area where grape growers often go wrong, usually by giving too much rather than too little. Grapes have deep root systems and they are surprisingly drought-tolerant once established. During that first year, water regularly to help the roots get established, about 1 inch per week if it does not rain. After that first year, you can back off considerably. I water my mature vines deeply every 10 to 14 days during dry spells, and that is about it. The key word there is deeply. You want to encourage those roots to grow down, not stay near the surface. A long, slow soak is better than frequent light sprinklings. Overwatering is actually worse than underwatering with grapes. Too much water leads to excessive leafy growth, diluted fruit flavor, and increased disease pressure. If we get a rainy summer, my grapes are actually less sweet than during a drier year. The vine puts all that water into the fruit, and you end up with watery, bland grapes. For fertilizing, grapes are moderate feeders. I apply a balanced granular fertilizer in early spring just as the buds are starting to swell. Something like a 10-10-10 works fine, applied at about ½ pound per vine, scattered in a circle around the base. Then I give them a side dressing of compost in late spring. That is really all they need. One mistake I see is people fertilizing too heavily, especially with nitrogen. You end up with a vine that grows like crazy, but produces very little fruit. If your vine is putting out tons of leafy growth but sparse grape clusters, back off on the fertilizer. Throughout the growing season, you will want to do some shoot management. As those new shoots grow in spring and early summer, they can get out of control quickly. I go through my vines every few weeks and remove shoots that are growing in the wrong direction, suckers coming up from the base of the trunk, and any growth that is crowding the fruiting zone. This keeps good air circulation through the canopy and makes sure sunlight reaches the developing grape clusters. Some growers also remove a few leaves around the grape clusters as they start to ripen. This exposes the fruit to more sunlight and air, which improves ripening and reduces disease. Just do not go overboard. The vine still needs leaves for photosynthesis. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them, because even the best cared for grapevines can have issues from time to time. First, powdery mildew. This is probably the most common disease for grape growers, especially in humid climates. You will see a white powdery coating on the leaves, and it can spread to the fruit. The key to preventing it is air circulation. Keep your vine pruned open so air can flow through. If you do get it, remove affected leaves and treat with a sulfur-based fungicide or a baking soda spray. 1 tablespoon of baking soda per gallon of water with a few drops of dish soap. Apply every 7 to 10 days. Second, black rot. This is a fungal disease that causes brown spots on leaves and hard, shriveled, mummified berries. It overwinters on those mummified fruits, so your first line of defense is sanitation. Remove and destroy any mummified berries you see, both on the vine and on the ground beneath it. Keeping the canopy open and treating with a copper fungicide in early spring before symptoms appear helps tremendously. Third, Japanese beetles. These shiny copper and green beetles can skeletonize grape leaves in a matter of days. I hand-pick them in the morning when they are sluggish and drop them into a bucket of soapy water. For heavy infestations, neem oil or spinosad can help. Avoid those Japanese beetle traps. They actually attract more beetles to your yard than they catch. Fourth, birds. Once your grapes start to ripen, every bird in the neighborhood is going to want a taste. Bird netting is the only reliable solution. Drape it over your vines a week or two before harvest and secure it at the bottom so birds cannot sneak underneath. Yes, it is a bit of work to put up and take down, but it is the difference between harvesting grapes yourself and watching the robins enjoy them. Fifth, poor fruit set. If your vine flowers but does not develop many grapes, the problem is usually weather-related. Cold, rainy weather during bloom interferes with pollination. There is not much you can do about that in a given year, but make sure you are not fertilizing with nitrogen, which promotes leaves at the expense of fruit. Also, overly vigorous vines sometimes have poor fruit set, so keep up with your pruning. The good news is, if you follow the steps we have covered, good site selection, proper pruning, and reasonable care, you should be able to avoid most of these problems. I have been growing grapes for years now, and the longer I do it, the fewer problems I seem to have, because I have learned what my vines need. Now for the moment we have all been waiting for. Harvesting your grapes. This is where all that pruning and care pays off. And let me tell you, there is nothing quite like walking out to your backyard and picking clusters of ripe grapes that you grew yourself. So how do you know when grapes are ready to harvest? Here is the thing. Color is not always a reliable indicator. Some varieties change color weeks before they are actually ripe. The best way to tell is simply to taste them. When grapes are ripe, they will be sweet, flavorful, and the seeds inside, if it is a seeded variety, will have turned from green to brown. The grapes should come off the stem easily. If you have to tug hard, they are not ready. Another indicator is the stem of the cluster itself. When grapes are ripe, the stem starts to turn from green to brown and become slightly woody. I check my grapes every few days once they start looking close. You want to catch them at peak ripeness because, unlike some fruits, grapes do not continue to ripen after you pick them. What you pick is what you get. For harvesting, use a sharp pair of garden snips or scissors to cut the entire cluster from the vine. Do not try to pull it off because you will damage the vine. Handle the clusters gently because grapes bruise easily. I like to harvest in the morning when the grapes are cool. They stay firmer and last longer that way. Most grape varieties ripen somewhere between late August and October, depending on your climate and the variety. Early, varieties like Reliance might be ready in late August, while late-season varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon might hang on until mid-October. A mature, well-maintained grapevine can produce 15 to 20 pounds of fruit per year. That is a lot of grapes from a single plant, enough for eating fresh, making preserves, and yes, making juice. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. Let me show you how to turn your homegrown grapes into fresh grape juice. And I am telling you, once you taste homemade grape juice, you will never look at the store-bought stuff the same way again. Here is exactly how I do it. Start with about 4 pounds of ripe grapes, still on the stems, is fine. Give them a good rinse under cool water. Then pull the grapes off the stems and put them in a large pot. You do not need to be too fussy about getting every little bit of stem. A few small pieces will not hurt anything. Mash the grapes with a potato masher, or your clean hands to break them up, and release the juice. Add about a cup of water to the pot. This helps prevent scorching and makes extraction easier. Bring the mashed grapes to a simmer over medium heat, stirring occasionally. Let them simmer for about 10 minutes. You will see the juice releasing and the color deepening. Do not let it boil hard, just a gentle simmer. Now strain the mixture through a fine mesh strainer lined with cheesecloth into a large bowl. Let it drip for at least an hour, or overnight in the refrigerator for the clearest juice. You can press on the solids gently to extract more juice, but too much pressing makes it cloudy. At this point, you have got pure grape juice. Taste it and add a little sugar if you want it sweeter, though ripe homegrown grapes are usually sweet enough on their own. You can drink it fresh, refrigerate it for up to a week, or process it in a water bath canner for longer storage. I do this every fall with my Concord grapes, and the flavor is incredible. It tastes like grapes are supposed to taste. Rich, complex, and nothing like the watered-down concentrate you get at the grocery store. So that is everything you need to know about growing grapes for a huge harvest. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you do not miss future videos. I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know what grape variety you are growing. Or if you have any questions, ask away. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, good luck in the garden and keep on growing.